Okay, hey, welcome to another episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. A really cool review for you guys from the brand D1 Milano. A little about them: they were founded in 2013 out of Milan, Italy. Currently, D1 Milano has offices in Dubai and Hong Kong and is distributed in 28 countries in hundreds of stores. They definitely have a clear Genta steel sports inspired design aesthetic that carries over throughout all their models, but at the same time without being a direct homage to any specific model references, which I think is quite unique within this space. Now, in terms of the type of watch, I think this falls right within that everyday watch type of space. Now, some key common characteristics in design when you're looking for something that you can wear every day. Of course, you're going to want that versatile blend of both sporty and dressy attributes, and you have something that's a little bit more unique here, definitely more outside of your everyday, but I wouldn't call it quite a wild card watch because I think it is still quite versatile and wearable. This is their square model in the skeleton style with the gray depth colorway. It's inspired by the past, made for the future, and directly inspired by the vintage world. They combined the timeless case of their square with the bold dial design of a skeleton to create a unique timepiece. These go for $725 direct, and I think they're quite unique. So a big shout out to D1 Milano for reaching out, sending this piece in for me to share with you all. So with all that said, let's go ahead, zoom the camera out, get this piece in hand, and take a closer look. Okay, guys, now quite unique in terms of the proposition here, right? You're getting something that does have a skeleton dial, also has that integrated bracelet design, even has a couple hints of Cartier de Santos, which I really appreciate, especially considering that, you know, that's a watch with very unique lines, and it's something that isn't often replicated. And this doesn't replicate it. It definitely just takes a couple of hints, a little nuance here and there, and blends it into this, you know, very popular steel sports formula that's really popular right now, whether it's, you know, from somebody like Tissot or all the way across through Citizen, and even there's some Seiko Quartz models, and of course all the way upstream in terms of a lot of the other options in terms of Swiss-made timepieces. Now, in terms of the dimensions here, I think these are really nice within a sweet spot, even 37 millimeters across. Oh, look, as you can see, you can actually see there through the dial itself, especially if I get it straight on to where it's only reflecting off of the black camera lens. But then, of course, when you get all that play with the finishing on the dial, then it can kind of distract you from the fact that it does go all the way through. So, okay, I'll just point that out very quickly. So 37 millimeters in diameter, 11.2 millimeters thick, so not the thinnest, but definitely not the thickest, but because of this side slab, you know, it's definitely gonna appear visually probably about as thick as it is. It's not going to be trimmed down very much, but I will say it is quite a clean silhouette. I mean, look at the brushing on the side of this case. This is actually really impressively done. Let me give it a quick little wipe here just so we can optimize a little bit in terms of just showing off that finishing. Look at how fine that brushing is, and you know, there's different grades, just like with polishing, and this is definitely a very high grade of satin finish on here, so very, very nice. Now, in terms of lug to lug, 45 millimeters. That's not counting these end links that kind of come off of the case, but again, it's still a very short way, and definitely all turns down. So I just wouldn't want you to get caught up with the numbers game when it comes to something like that, especially with you know, such a unique proportion and shape. One thing you'll also notice is this finish is very interesting. So you have that satinization, but instead of a high polished bevel, check that out. You actually have a matte blasted finish there that actually delineates between the brushed surfaces. So I don't know, there's just something that's a little bit different about that again, and I can appreciate just those little things that were done a little bit differently, and it all comes together in a really nice way. I just dig that. Look how clean and how crisp that is. And the nice thing is you don't have to worry about fingerprints on that because it's actually matted, but it's just playing with the light in a different way because of the high high luster. I don't want to call it a luster because it's not polished, but it's like definitely a brighter matte, right? Sometimes when you get something matted, it can be very porous and it can look very dark. Here, they used a very, very fine, I would say probably a sandblast to get this feeling so bright. So I don't know, I dig that. And again, it's something that's a little bit different than what you normally see, and I can appreciate that because I think on paper a lot of people see something like this and think, oh, it's pretty basic. You just kind of take an integrated sports design, you just slap a skeleton on it. But I think there was some really cool, interesting, deliberate choices that were made from a design standpoint. Now, the sapphire is flat and it does have an inner air coating, and you can actually even see, interesting enough, is that the text that would be on the dial are actually on the underside of the crystal, so that does also help give you a bit of a three-dimensional kind of appeal to it. So I like the way that they did that as well. So again, there's little ornate details that kind of come together and just make this feel like a complete timepiece. I dig that, especially well under $1,000. Now, it's not cheap by any means. It's $725, but when you think about a mechanical, skeletonized, integrated sports watch, then you're probably going to be thinking that sounds quite expensive. Now, looking at the case construction itself, you're getting that vertically brushed bezel, nice and flat across the top, but it does have some beautiful contours as well. You actually do have a screw down crown, which is very interesting. I wasn't expecting that. And the screw down crown itself is also matte finish, so it's not satin brushed, but a nice matte finish. Now, the movement, you can kind of see it through the front of the dial, but we'll take a look at it back here and you're going to recognize it that much more. Check that out. You probably recognize that Seiko rotor. This is a Seiko Instruments NH70. So with that, you're getting 41 hours in terms of the power reserve, and it's going to beat at 3 hertz or 21,600 vibrations per hour in terms of that beat rate. The case back is nicely see-through and screwed in, and I gotta say, it's kind of nice to see that. And obviously having that display case back is one of the things that makes you able to take advantage of everything actually coming all the way through as you look through that dial, and it comes all the way through. So if you had a solid case back, although you probably could have made the watch slightly thinner, I think that would kind of defeat the whole purpose. Unless maybe they did some cool kind of super high polished or like guilloche back plate, screwed it in, then at least you'd have that kind of reflecting back, or maybe just a high polish reflecting back the light. But chances are it'd be catching a lot of dimness and darkness. So I don't know, it's something about having that light pass through there I think is actually pretty cool. Now, getting into the dial, or what's left of the dial after so much has been skeletonized, you're going to see applied indices over a skeletonized dial. Of course, text printed on the underside of the crystal, polished hands, and they are lumed, although I believe that's the only lume on the dial is going to be the hands. I don't think the indices are lumed, but we'll get to that here. And you also do have a nicely capped hand stack. Check that out. Look at the hand stack, and look at that. It's just those little touches that when I see it, I appreciate it, so I have to call it out. So that stack cap there on the hand stack looks really, really great. So it's not just a raw kind of pinion there. So I think that's cool. You're also getting 5 atmospheres of water resistance, which is pretty good. That's 50 meters. Considering you do have a screw down crown, that definitely helps with kind of confidence inspiring, in terms of water resistance. Also, with the display case back, with it being screwed in, being relatively thin, considering how thick the movement is and the layers that are to it I think that means that, you're going to be feeling pretty confident with this thing in water, especially with the screw down crown. So it'd be nice if it had 100 meters of water resistance, of course, but 50 meters is nothing to sneeze at, especially if you do have that screw down crown. Now getting into the lugs, 19 millimeters, integrated lug though, so it's not like you're going to be swapping out with a lot of 19 millimeter straps, although you probably could. You maybe can go for like an interesting bund setup or something like that if you really wanted to spice things up. And then you do have basically solid single Y links, and these are really well finished in terms of that flat brush there, and they also do have the matte blasted accent, so that ties into the case, and again, it just gives it a bit of a more tool-like aesthetic. I know, hey, well, it has a skeleton dial. What do you mean tool-like aesthetic? Well, the finishing definitely has more of an industrial feel to it, and I don't know, it's just different, and it feels more contemporary, and I can appreciate that. So it does have quite a dramatic taper, so a lot of you guys that want that traditional taper are really going to appreciate this. It tapers down from about 23 millimeters down to 15.7 millimeters. It does have a split pin construction in terms of these links. They're also very short, so you don't need any half links because they're all kind of already at half link size. And you're going to also see this hidden butterfly clasp, which has a friction fit retention, which is kind of what we're used to seeing from D1. It's not the most elegant setup, but it does the job, and again, it's a design piece in terms of hiding everything. You don't have any triggers sticking out, so I kind of understand it. I still would kind of prefer if there was, triggers or something like that. I don't think it would break up the aesthetic that much, but I will say it does look awesome with the hidden, clasp setup as is, and it is very nicely articulated. It is only semi-collapsible though, so if you lay this flat, like, it doesn't lay all the way flat because there is a certain amount of body to this, and these links will lock kind of, as you can see, on that end, but they're not going to lock coming this direction, which is all you really have to worry about in terms of comfort. So you can see it's going to be quite comfortable, but in terms of like laying it out, when you get home or something like that, if you don't have a watch case, it's pretty much going to be slightly elevated all the time, which is actually pretty cool for pictures and whatnot. I think that actually looks really good. But with that said, let's actually get it on the wrist and see how it wears. Okay guys, as you can see on my 7.5-inch wrist, I think this wears quite beautifully. Check out the light play on those flat links there. Very nice profile, hugs the wrist really well with those nice short lug to lug measurements. Of course, if I do get my wrist a bit too close to the lens, you're going to get quite a bit of perspective distortion. That's just going to make the watch seem a lot larger on the wrist than it actually is, similar to like what you see on Instagram, where it's a lot of times it feels like sometimes you look at a watch and you're like, whoa, that thing looks huge. And I do have a pretty large wrist, right? At 7.5 inches, you can see, although it's not super flat and wide and accommodating, it's actually quite round. But what I like to do is keep my wrist nice and low, and then just tighten up the frame here so you guys can get a bit of a, still a detailed look, but just add a bit of a truer aspect ratio as to how this may appear on your own wrist to your own eye. So with that, check that out now. Now it's really nicely centered. You're seeing a lot more of that overhang of the bracelet, and I think it looks great, guys, especially for a square watch, which, those measurements can be quite deceiving. Some of you are thinking, oh man, 37 is too small. Well, when it comes to a square watch, 37 is quite large. So again, a lot of it has to do with the proportions and the design, and I think they really nailed it here. The only thing I wish is that they could have got it thinner. The first model that I reviewed from this line, the square line that they have, was actually a quartz model, so it actually flowed just a little bit better on wrist because of that additional thinness. So I would love to see something like this done, maybe with a thinner automatic movement, maybe just foregoing, of course, the skeletonized dial, and just having something a little bit more simple, maybe something also vertically brushed to tie in to the beautiful kind of top face of this case, which I think is great. Or you could do something high end and manually wound, I think would be really great too. And again, I say they should put something a little bit more expensive in here, because this case and bracelet, I think, warrant it in terms of the design, in terms of the fit and finish. It all looks very, very good. So with that said, let's actually get it off the wrist, set up for some Lume shots, low light transition, and closing thoughts. Okay, let's go ahead and hit the lights here. Okay. Yeah, no, not a lot of Lume. That is disappointing, but at the same time, I guess shouldn't be surprising. Just because it's not really that type of watch. But of course, one thing I like to work in is a bit of low light transition. Just gonna have to give the camera a second to be able to refocus on here. Maybe I'll hit it with some black light. I could have sworn there was supposed to be some Lume there on the hands. Might have just not been very strong. So let's just try to give it a little quick flash here. Okay, so there is Lume on the hands, but clearly, I mean, unless you're charging it up with a black light, you're probably not going to get a lot of performance out of that. But one thing I'm still going to work in, of course, is going to be that low light transition, because you're always going to be out in the middle of a field enjoying direct sunlight. A lot of times you're going to find yourself coming in and out of buildings, walking underneath overhangs, you're just hanging out underneath the shade of a tree. So it is nice to see what these colors, textures, and finishes render like in less than optimal lighting. And man, guys, this dial... holy smokes, look at that thing. It definitely plays with the light in a really interesting way. Different than the way most skeletonized dials would. Because typically, really, you're just going to be looking at a lot of, you know, kind of bridges and whatnot and all of the inner mechanicals. Here, you actually do have kind of a pseudo dial there that does have that nice kind of... you know, guillot-shaped pattern, which is going to catch the light in a really nice uniform way, and then kind of draw your eyes to some of the cutouts there that do make this, you know, again, it's a movement that has been skeletonized, but it's not like it was necessarily built from the ground up as something that was meant to be a skeleton. I know it's a skeletonized movement out of the box, but clearly, you know, it's based on the typical, you know, 4R type of architecture there. So still, I think really cool. I mean, look at the bracelet. Look at the case. Look at those sweet, you know, matte bevels. So different, right? To have matted bevels there, just matte blasted instead of having a really deep, dark contrast with a glossy, you know, reflective finish. I don't know. There's something, again, it's just a little bit different, and I can appreciate that. So with that said, let's actually get into some closing thoughts. So on the wrist, great size and wrap on it. I would have preferred the taper to probably just go down to about 18 millimeters since the clasp is hidden. Although I know folks with smaller wrists or just people that really enjoy, you know, really dramatic tapers are just going to dig this for what it is. So that's more of a personal preference for me. In terms of model variants, it's also available in the thin quartz movement with various color options. So definitely check the site links for details. I'll leave those down in the description. In terms of comparable models, the D1 Square 37 blends Santos D Cartier and Genta-esque vibes with a dash of, like, say, something like the modern Rado Square into something that feels quite relevant in today's market while feeling less bland and formulaic than much of the competition, especially under $1,000. So I think that's notable. So for me, guys, bottom line, the D1 is, you know, D1 Milano, they're an interesting brand. They're definitely quite different. They do business differently. They're not just your basic micro brand. You know, they sell through dealers and through multiple stores, and you can get them directly online as well. So they do have, like, I'd say a kind of a best of both worlds type of approach. So you're getting kind of some of the benefits of scale, but at the same time, you know, you're able to order directly for prices that aren't, you know, crazy through the roof. So I dig that. They have, it's just that crossover between both enthusiasts and casual consumers alike. Like, I think non-watch people will see this, and if they like the design, they're going to like the design. And I think people who like watches, of course, I think they're going to find a lot of interest here as well. And that's just not always the way it is for certain watches. So I think all things considered, at $725, I think this version does seem to manage to feel like a bit of a bargain still, which is surprising, even with its humble Seiko movements. I really liked this one in the quartz and would love to see it similarly thin, non-skeleton, kind of Miyota 9039 series powered variation in the future. But I think even as is in an often, I would say, polarizing skeleton layout, I think it's still quite handsome and impressively built. And, as dynamic as it is in terms of its stylings, I do think it's still quite versatile and something that could easily be worn in a lot of different situations, especially with that screw down crown and just the overall really nice, chunky, metallic, contemporary look to it. So with that said, let me know what you all think down in the comments below. If you liked the video, please do it like, and if you haven't already, please subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.